All right, folks, we've been doing a deep dive into the failure of the George Floyd Justice Act in the United States Senate. It is pitted South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Republican, against Democrat Senator Cory Booker. Now, we have been breaking down for you exactly where Senator Scott has stood on this issue. He has said that he did not move forward on the bill because Democrats wanted to defund the police. He insists in the bill that there are several clauses that show where they wanted to take money from law enforcement. His position, they must keep giving money. On Tuesday, two police organizations came out publicly stating that there was nothing in the proposed legislation that defunded police. One of them was the Fraternal Order Police. Senator Scott's office sent me an email today showing other law enforcement groups who take the opposite position. All right, so we're going to read for you exactly what those are. So let's actually go through that. This was a particular statement that came from one of those groups. I want to read from that please. So let's go ahead and pull that graphic up so you can actually see this graphic. And so one of these organizations, and like I say, what you have is you got to understand there's not one law enforcement organization. There are different law enforcement groups. And so that's what Scott's office is banking on. And so they're saying you have the sheriff's organization that they are in opposition to the bill. But again, you have two other groups that are in support of the bill. Yeah, I know it sounds real confusing, folks, because it is confusing and to understand exactly what is going on. And so here's what you have here, okay, with this particular sheriff's organization, all right, which is SCSA, and that's what they actually go by. Now, that is the South Carolina Sheriff's Association. Now, here's what's interesting, all right. It's the South Carolina Sheriff's Association. There are 49 other states. But again, Scott is banking on them. And so this is what they wrote. They were particularly disappointed to learn of the deterioration of negotiations on national police reform. Now, they wrote, various media outlets have attempted to determine who is at fault for the collapse of bipartisan discussion. Some have cited support or criticism from various national law enforcement organizations. In fact, some have gone so far to allege Senator Tim Scott and his staff operated in bad faith and against the whole, against the wishes of police groups. So this person, as someone who literally sat at the negotiation table with Senator Scott, Graham, and Booker, I want to clarify a few matters. Now, so again, this is coming from the president of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association, all right, who was last name is Tolson, all right. So here's what he lays out in here. He lays out in here that, okay, blah, 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 I have great respect, admiration, yada, 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 for these other organizations. But he says, he goes on to say, honest communication, we can't understand each other's concerns and objectives, yada, 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 yada. He said, second, while I never saw a legislative draft that contained the words defunding the police, that does not mean provisions in these drafts would not cause law enforcement to lose funding. Several drafts contain provisions that prohibited states or local units of government from being eligible for COPS or Burns-JAG grants unless certain statutes were enacted, making critical funding for agencies in the executive branch contingent upon the enactment of statutes by the legislative branch, in my opinion, is wrong. Had these provisions been enacted, law enforcement agencies nationwide likely would have lost important federal funding because their state legislatures either would not or could not comply with the federal requirements. This is de facto defunding the police. Okay, let me unpack why that is a lie. Now, first, I want you to leave the statement up. Leave the statement up. Leave the statement up because I need you to understand. I need you to see for your own words because I need you to realize we showed you the video where a year ago Senator Tim Scott said that if folks were not in compliance, they could not get the grants. He said that. In the executive order that Donald Trump signed, that Senator Tim Scott supported, it said the same thing. So all of a sudden, why is there a difference? What's going on here that they are asserting that, oh, if you don't do these things, you can't get the money? Senator Tim Scott actually said it. If y'all had the soundbite when he was on with Judy Woodruff from PBS, he said it. Listen.
We're saying these things should be tied to federal funding, that if departments go ahead with them, they risk losing funding. And yet you also said today that this is something that should be debated. The chokehold should be debated for the American people to hear. So it sounds like you're open to a complete ban on a chokehold. Is that right?
Well, I would say it this way. My legislation gets us to the position where if you are in a law enforcement department that does not already have a ban on chokeholds, you do not have access to the federal funding. The House bill does not have the ability to actually, in my opinion, ban chokeholds. What they do is they defund states' revenue streams from the federal government. It's kind of the same thing, to be honest with you. The fact of the matter is that policing is a local government decision, not a federal decision. So I'd love to see how the Democrats thread that needle from federalism and the local department's ability to make the decisions. We do that through the refusing to give them the grant dollars. The White House, in their executive order, does the exact same thing through a certification process. So all three levers of government have the same objective. I think we get there if we keep working together, looking for a solution.
Okay. He literally said, we do that in the executive order. So, Senator Tim Scott, what the hell is the difference? That's what the federal government does. The federal government, in numerous bills that I guarantee you he's voted for, tells states, if you do not do these things, you can't get the federal funding. That's the only way the federal folks are able to make changes. I told y'all before, when the federal highway funding, they wanted to increase the drinking age, the legal drinking age in America from 18 to 21. The federal government said to South Carolina, to the other 49 states, if you want to qualify for federal highway funds, you will only get the money if you raise your minimum drinking age to 21. That's a fact. So he's now all of a sudden, oh, I disagree with that from a state level. I'm sorry, y'all, that dog just not gonna hunt. And so he's saying, oh, these, policing, it's a local thing. And this is a problem. He's saying it's a local thing. Well, why in the hell are we even discussing a federal bill then? See, you can't have it both ways, Senator Tim Scott. You can't say it's a local thing, but then you're leading this federal bill. And you ought to see, and look, here are all of these statements that Senator Tim Scott has made about this particular bill. I mean, he said all kind of stuff. He said change requires resources. Sadly, the Democrats' proposal contained multiple measures that would have diminished funding for law enforcement. No, it wouldn't diminish it. It simply says if you do not do these things, you don't get the federal funds. That ain't cutting funding. That's simply saying you want the money, you got to do some stuff. Scott says we all agree only the best should wear the badge. If we want to protect vulnerable communities, we have to provide the resources needed to train and retain the best. Yeah, but you also got to make changes to how they actually do it. I grew up in some very poor communities, always wondering if my mother would make it into the house safely after her late shifts. Folks in those communities deserve better, and I'll continue working until they see solutions. Really? Then he goes on. Under GOP leadership, we saw solutions. Permanent funding for HBCUs. That is a lie. That is a lie, Senator Scott. You did not do permanent funding for HBCUs. In fact, you can say under GOP leadership, it wasn't even a GOP bill. That was led by Congresswoman Alma Adams, Democrat from North Carolina, HBCU graduate. Please don't lie. Record low unemployment rates. At a point, they were record low unemployment rates. Then they double when COVID hit. So please stop it. A fair justice system. Stop lying, Senator Tim Scott. Democrats control the House. Criminal Justice Reform Bill, the First Step Act, was passed by a Democratic House. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries led it. That bill was strengthened in the United States Senate when Senator Cory Booker, Senator Kamala Harris, and Senator Dick Durbin, and including Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, said that bill did not go far enough and it was strengthened. Please stop trying to claim credit under GOP leadership. No, that is simply false. If it were not for the Democrats insisting on changes being made, you would not have had the First Step Act. Stop taking credit for things you didn't do. He goes, if the Democrats really want solutions now, they should come back to the negotiating table. No. How about you be honest about actually what's going on? Now, I told you these statements, all these people releasing these various statements about this particular bill. And I told you there was a sheriff's association that also was taking a different position. All right. And so here's what I find to be interesting. And again, Senator Tim Scott's office sent me an email. OK, you have two groups, Major County Sheriffs of America, and then you have National Association of Police Organizations. All right. The Major County Sheriffs Association of America, they sent out their statement. And so that's the problem. What you have is you have different folks, different groups on the aisles. And so this is what they said. The MCSA, legislative proposals could diminish policing resources in many ways without specifically defunding programs. What the hell? You can't have it both ways. The net effect of one proposal that Senator Scott opposed was that fewer resources would be available to departments that would be unlikely to be able to immediately comply with the many new regulations. Hey, y'all, that's what happens. We support and encourage legislation. Y'all, if y'all want to hear contradiction, listen to this. We support and encourage legislation that leads to better policing and more safety for communities. However, legislation that adds more regulations while threatening existing funding levels is setting up our law enforcement agencies for failure. No, it's not. Stop lying. You cannot complain about more regulations and you want the money. Carrot, stick carrot on a carrot, stick carrot. If you want more money, federal folks are saying you got to do these things to get more money. So what Senator Tim Scott wants to do is to say, hey, I'm just going to give y'all more money. No. You have got to comply. You have got to make changes to how you behave, how your officers behave. The problem is they don't want the level of accountability that Democrats have been calling for. That is the fundamental problem here. So, y'all, I've gone through the bill. And the stuff Senator Tim Scott sent me about, oh, it would defund? No. What the Democrats were saying is, if y'all want to get this extra money, you've got to do some things to qualify for it. It is no different than the executive order that Trump signed. You want to get the money, you got to be certified. You got an option. Don't get certified, don't get the money. No one is forcing. See, this is the thing that Senator Tim Scott and his team, they're not admitting to. No one is forcing any law enforcement agency to do anything. What they're saying is, if you want more money, this is what you got to do. Hell, that's like my mama and daddy saying, so you want me to fund your trip? Well, I'm going to let you do some shit around the house. That's like me saying, no, I ain't going to do extra stuff around the house. I want the money. And my parents like, well, hell, I ain't giving you the money. Y'all, this is not hard. But the problem is law enforcement and Senator Tim Scott want it both ways. They do not want to force these law enforcement people to make changes. And then Scott's talking about federalism and this is all local. Guess what? That's fine. But see, here's my other problem right here, Senator Tim Scott. You of all people got to stop this nonsense about federalism and states' rights when your state gets damn near half of its budget from the federal government. It's amazing how y'all don't like federalism until you need a check. The federal government right now sets conditions on housing grants, environmental grants, transportation grants, up and down the board. But all of a sudden, Senator Tim Scott, no. We can't have that when it comes to policing. No, sorry. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it because it's nonsense. They don't want the accountability, folks. That's what they don't want. I want to bring in several people. Redditt Hudson, he's the founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability. We have Cheryl Dorsey, retired Los Angeles Police Department Sergeant. We have Michael Harriot, senior writer for The Root. He's out of Birmingham. Cheryl also is the author of the book The Confidence Chronicles, the greatest crime story never told, out of Los Angeles. Redditt, I'm going to start with you. Go to Cheryl, go to Michael. Redditt, I've walked through the bill. I've talked to Congresswoman Karen Bass. I've been texting Senator Tim Scott. I've been emailing his office. We've been trying to get Senator Cory Booker on. I have not talked to him. We've talked to his staff. Senator Booker, I need you to come talk to Black America, please. If you found time to go and meet the press and Jake Tapper on CNN and other shows, you can come do Black Media, okay? So that needs to be said. What's a trip here, Redditt, is the game that Senator Tim Scott is playing by touting the sheriff's organization and this South Carolina sheriff's group, okay? And then you have the Fraternal Order of Police, which is considered the major police organization. And another one that said what he's saying is not it. Your assessment of what's going on here when it comes to the George Floyd Justice Act.
Well, you hit the nail on the head already, Roland. Senator Scott is responding to his handlers. He's doing what his handlers want him to do. I read an excellent article by the brother that's on the panel with us today, Michael Harriot, who pointed out that Senator Scott started back in 2015 introducing a bill that called for exactly what you said, federal withholding of funds for states that didn't comply with the guidelines of the bill that he set forth. He is on the side of those folks. Again, those people he represents in those law enforcement agencies are never, ever going to vote for accountability, support accountability for enforcement agencies that violate, our rights, our constitutional rights, our human rights, our civil liberties. They're never going to do that. They're going to stall, bullshit, and shuffle all the way until Democrats do what they need to do, either get rid of the filibuster and cram some of these things down the throats of aggressive, open opposition or not. But Tim Scott is going to be Tim Scott. I don't think any of us are surprised by his performance.
Cheryl, again, I have taken a lot of time to walk through this. I've gone through these particular statements. I've gone through what folks have said. I've listened to what Scott said on Face the Nation. I listened to what Booker said. I've spent the time going through it. I sat here and read the statement from the National Fraternal Order of Police, as well as the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Okay? Now, I'm not in law enforcement, but frankly, if we're talking about who are the major police organizations, it's really the International Association of the Chiefs of Police and Fraternal Order of Police. But Scott is using what these sheriffs folks are saying, when if we really want to be honest, the biggest problem in this country with policing is coming from the jurisdictions covered by the FOP as well as the IACP.
So here's the deal. There's a lot of double talk and a lot of code speak, and we understand that there are 18,000 police departments across these United States, and all of them have unions of one sort or another. So to cherry pick one, South Carolina's police union, and tout what they have to say as somehow having more sway and meaning is really being disingenuous. This was never going to pass in the first place. Tim Scott made it perfectly clear in the very beginning when he said, qualified immunity is going to be a non-starter in any negotiation. That means having officers be held accountable, having officers be able to be charged when they violate policy, when they commit murder, when they use deadly force as a first resort rather than a last resort. Qualified immunity would stop all of that if it were removed out of the police officers' Bill of Rights. They do not want that. And Tim Scott knows that. Also, in this George Floyd Justice and Reform Act, I've got so many issues with it because a lot of what they talk about deals with federal funding not being given, as you said, if they don't do certain things, or if they do certain things like no-knock warrants. It only applies to federal no-knock warrants. When was the last time anybody saw a federal officer serve a doggone search warrant for narcotics? Breonna Taylor wasn't killed by federal officers. She was killed by state officers. And so all of this talk about no-knock warrants and banning chokeholds versus other departments who continue to use the chokehold, again, would only affect if it's a federal agency, not local and state police, because police chiefs have tremendous autonomy, and they will continue to do exactly what it is that they have been doing, which is sheltering errant officers. All of them are being intellectually dishonest in their assertions that somehow this is about money. This is about police accountability. Be clear.
Michael, you have a piece in The Root with the headline, "In Loving Memory of Tim Scott." You say this in the piece. You said, but before his untimely death, and first of all, obviously he hasn't died, but we know what you're talking about. You said Scott also believed in police reform. He didn't just believe in it; he actually tried to do something about it. He tried before Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck. He tried before Louisville, Kentucky police officers lied on an affidavit to obtain a no-knock warrant for Breonna Taylor's home. Before Ahmaud Arbery, before white people pretended to care about black people for one brief summer, Tim Scott cared about black people. Unpack for the folks watching and listening how Senator Tim Scott today is totally different from the Senator Tim Scott from a few years ago.
Yeah. So I think you unpacked a lot of it, Roland, in your open. But one thing I kind of disagree with is, like, we think we're saying Tim Scott doesn't want police reform. It's clear, like, Tim Scott came up with the idea. If he calls this defunding the police, he came up with this idea back in 2015 when Walter Scott was shot and killed by a North Charleston police officer. And Tim Scott since then has been trying to introduce the Walter Scott Notification Act, which would create a database of police misconduct and use of lethal force, right? So Tim Scott believes in this. Tim Scott sold himself out. He knows his party doesn't believe in this. And they sent the black dude out there to take the heat because he's Tim Scott. He's the black Republican, right? But since 2015, Tim Scott has been trying to get some of these reforms. And as we talked about qualified immunity and no-knock warrants and chokehold bans, that the mechanism, this is what Tim Scott's office told me, right? This is not what I think. I talked to Tim Scott, and he got his chief of staff to walk me through the initial version of the bill. And they called the withholding of funds, this is their quote, a complicated strategy to enforce the reforms that we want, right? So if Tim Scott is complaining about this stuff, he's complaining about the stuff that Tim Scott came up with. And that's important to know, because when we talk about these police unions, we have to first of all realize that the Fraternal Order of Police oversees and represents more than half of the police officers in the country. And then we have to really know that there is this little known white supremacist movement called the Sovereign Sheriffs Movement that believes, based on this interpretation of a white supremacist manifesto from the 1600s, that the sheriffs have the ultimate authority in America. That was one of the groups that started the riots at the Capitol. That was one of the groups that they feared would rise up if Donald Trump wasn't reelected. And this sheriff's group that's why these sheriff groups are backing Tim Scott, because it's about white supremacy. It is not about policing, right? If you look back when Senator Jeff Sessions went and talked to them and told them that they are the backbone of the Anglo-Saxon law enforcement in America. This is what this is all about. So we have to know that Tim Scott is not arguing against Democrats. Tim Scott is ultimately arguing against what Tim Scott created.
I mean, Redditt, here's what Michael wrote that is just hilarious. He says, more than a year ago, Scott's own Deputy Chief of Staff, Alyssa Lee Richardson, told The Root that reducing funding to police departments was a, quote, complicated mechanism that we had to create to hold every agency accountable. In the bill, under compliance, it says ineligibility for funds for any fiscal year beginning after the date of enactment of this act. A state that fails to comply with subsection A shall be subject to a 10% reduction of the funds that will otherwise be allocated for that fiscal year to the state. What the hell is the difference between that and what Democrats have in the bill?
I don't think there is a difference or a distinction between the two. It amounts to defunding. If you don't comply with what's laid out for you to comply with, you get defunded. But, you know, to Michael's point, with Tim Scott.
No. Hold on. I gotta stop you. No.
Go ahead.
You're not defunded. No, defunded means you don't get no. This is what defunded means. Defunded means my mom and daddy paying my rent. I act the ass. They say I'm stop paying your rent. That's defunded. Now, if mom and daddy say I must pull back 10% of your rent, hell, they still paying 90. So I ain't defunded. Defunded to me means we taking all your money. This is a 10% reduction. That means you're gonna get 90.
It was legislation that moved in the direction of defunding. But ultimately, what you have, man, is Tim Scott needing to make a stand in the aftermath of all the tragedies we've seen in the history, the entire history of policing in this country and its roots and foundation in white supremacy. Here is an opportunity for a black man in the Senate to stand up for his people, and then we just don't see it happening. And I would go further. As much work has been put into this federal bill, and to Cheryl's point, it is just a federal bill, although the utility of that is always as a model for those states that can be pushed in the direction of reform. I would just like to see a more aggressive posture from every black elected official up there in terms of leveraging the power that they do have. You know, if the Congressional Black Caucus, for example, me and my colleagues talk about this all the time, threw out some ultimatums. They are a significant percentage of the voting body of Congress. If they collectively, as a body, said, you know what, if we don't get what the hell we want in this bill, and we don't get, you know, what we need and what we're asking for, you won't get anything else on your side. We will let the whole thing, just like that's what the Republicans do. We will burn this whole shit down if you all don't meet us halfway. And they keep pulling a weaker, less aggressive party away from the will of the majority of people in this country. We all want to see a remade criminal justice system, not just reform. I think this whole system needs to be remade. But we will get nowhere near that with people like Tim Scott and others in positions of leadership who don't have the will to exercise the power that they have. I still say, based on other situations that I've seen Tim Scott operate in, separate and apart from police issues, the brother just looks like he's got handlers to me. I don't know him as well as you do, Michael.
Here's the deal for me, Cheryl.
That's what I see.
Here's my deal, Cheryl. Okay, Senator Tim Scott, why don't you, before you talk about what Dem should do, why don't you, Senator Tim Scott, put all the law enforcement groups in a room and say, I need y'all to agree on what all y'all gonna support before we move forward. Because see, this whole deal, most support, the sheriffs disagree, so therefore I ain't moving forward. No, that's called you in search of excuse, Cheryl.
Well, this is just a way to muddy up the waters and confuse people who aren't really paying attention and who aren't savvy. But like I said at the very beginning, at the end of the day, this is about police accountability. That's what this Justice and Reform Bill Act was all about. That was supposedly the purpose behind it. And we know that politicians who look like me, skin folk, are not interested and don't have the appetite, as Redditt said, to do the right thing. Even Clyburn, Majority Whip Clyburn, was talking in the very beginning about, well, this is a good bill, and I think we should pass it, even though it has no teeth, even though it doesn't do anything to deter bad behavior, to stop officers from killing black folks at will. He said, well, it's a good bill. I mean, it's not perfect, so let's just go ahead and take this good bill, not having qualified immunity on the table, until we can talk about a better, more perfect bill. That will never happen because, by and large, police administrators, police unions, FOP, whatever you want to call them, do not want their officers to be held accountable. Scott said, well, we won't hold the officers accountable, but maybe we might include the agency being held accountable. If you do that, what have you taught that officer? We have in the example of Derek Chauvin, 18 personnel complaints. He hadn't learned nothing because he hadn't been held accountable. And so this is problematic for me.
And Michael, here's what I don't understand. First of all, I cannot stand weak responses. How in the hell Senator Cory Booker and the Democrats just didn't quote what you put together? They had to know that beforehand. The moment Senator Cory Booker got asked, he should have said, well, I would really like for Senator Tim Scott to please go find and discover the old Senator Tim Scott and then quote this. See, they allowed Senator Tim Scott to go on Face the Nation, say all this sort of stuff, establish and control the narrative without saying Senator Tim Scott himself previously supported cutting funds for states that did not comply.
Right. They should have, first of all, when they started negotiations, they should have started with the point that we have to see how many black people the Republicans are going to let the police kill, right? That should have started the negotiations. And at every point, right, they should have said, we are taking the Republican ideas. We're taking this Tim Scott idea, right? Because they knew, they should have known from the history of the Republican Party that the Republicans would try to twist this, whatever they tried to do, into something that was bad, something that was defunding the police. But again, I can't understand why no Democrat has come forward now and said, hey, that whole stuff that he's talking about defunding, that was his idea. He came up with that. Like, we agree with it because it's a pretty good idea if you think about it, but it came from Tim Scott. So if that is reducing funds by 10% or 20% is defunding police, then Tim Scott came up with the idea for defunding the police. So everybody give him a hand. And that's what they should be doing. That's how they should be messaging it. But the more important part is that almost all of these things that we've discussed, right, about, the legislation, about the rules that should be given out for the grants, none of that is legislated. Like the DOJ, which is an executive level department, we could just change how those things, the money is given out. President Biden could do that. The DOJ could do that. The Attorney General could do that. And so we're going through all these complicated mechanisms when the Democratic Party, if Joe Biden had the impetus and the will, he could do it on his own for most of these things, right? Really qualified immunity is the only thing that he really couldn't touch. But all the rest of this stuff, we're discussing this when Joe Biden could have did that on his first day. That's what that Trump executive order has done, and Biden still hasn't rescinded that.
Folks, look, we're going to keep pressing this thing because, in matter of fact, I'm about to send Michael's piece to Senator Tim Scott right now, and I'm like, dude, I need you to explain yourself. I need you to explain how all of a sudden you're complaining about something you proposed. I can't wait to get what the answer is. I'm going to send it to his staff as well. Redditt, Hudson, Cheryl, Dorsey, Michael, Harriot, I certainly appreciate y'all on the show having this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punching!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?